Let's begin. So I'd like to welcome everyone back to this sixth and last session in this series of Shamatha practice, developing mindfulness. In this session, we'll be looking at how to integrate this practice into daily life. Let's begin by having a look at what we'll be covering in this session. We'll begin with a meditation, a mindfulness of breathing practice, and this time you choose which variation of mindfulness of breathing you want to focus on, either the full body, the rhythm of the breath, the abdomen, or the nostrils. Following that meditation, we'll do a summary of the main points of Shamatha practice that we've covered in this program. Then we'll look at what's called the prerequisites, how to set up our life to support this practice. And then we'll have a brief look at what's called the preliminary practices, the foundation practices that enables us to have a good framework for this and other practices. Then we'll look at some general advice. Following that, we'll do another meditation about building a vision for this life. In other words, to build a effective framework for this practice so that Shamatha can really be effective in transforming our life. And then we'll look at how to set up the day based on this Shamatha practice. And then, as per normal, we'll finish with some question answer. And so we'll begin with a meditation, mindfulness of breathing, and you can choose, again, any of the variations that we've practiced in this program, whatever you prefer to use. With all of them, we're using bare attention, meaning observing the tactile sensations directly, not imagining or visualizing the breath, and maintaining a continuity of mindfulness throughout the entire cycle of each in and out breath. And remember that we have as a basis relaxation. On that basis, improve stability, and then on that basis, enhance clarity of attention. So always keeping in mind the basis in relaxation. And if you find yourself getting constantly distracted from the breath, and you find it helpful, you can introduce a little bit of counting or noting of the breath to help stabilize the attention. And if you find yourself caught up in a lot of tension and you can't release that tension, particularly if you're focusing at entrance and nostrils, then move back out of there down into the full body or abdomen, establish the basis in relaxation, then you can go back to the nostrils. So that's the practice, very familiar by now in this program. So find a nice comfortable posture. Let's begin that meditation. We begin by establishing a good posture. The two main points with posture is to keep the back nice and straight and to allow the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. Softening and relaxing all the muscles in the face. Mouth and jaw, soft and relaxed. And all the muscles around the eyes, soft and relaxed. And in this way, allowing the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. And having established a good posture, then keeping the body as still as possible, avoiding any unnecessary movement. and allowing the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. Not trying to control or regulate the breath in any way. And with each out breath, letting go of any thoughts that may have arisen, happily releasing them. And allowing the mind to come to rest in the stillness of the present moment. Allowing the mind to remain relaxed, still, and clear. And having established a basis of a relaxed body and a relaxed mind, then setting a positive motivation for today's session. And try to make it as expansive as possible. And then on the basis of that motivation, bring your attention to the sensations of the breath, either the full body, rhythm of the breath, in the abdomen, or at the entrance of the nostrils, whichever you prefer. And maintain that continuity of mindfulness of the sensations of the breath throughout the entire cycle of each in and out breath. And monitor that mindfulness with introspection, noticing if you're becoming dull or distracted. And if you notice that you're becoming distracted, then first thing to do is relax. Then release the distraction and very gently return to the breath. And if you're noticing that you're falling into dullness or laxity, then use the in-breath as an opportunity to arouse and refresh your focus, to sharpen your focus on the breath. And if you're finding that you're constantly becoming distracted, then if you find it helpful, you might like to introduce some counting of the breath to help stabilize your attention. Or if you're finding that you're caught up in a lot of tension and you can't release it, then shift back into the full body or the rhythm of the breath to reestablish a basis in relaxation. And we can bring the meditation to a close. Let's begin with a short summary of the main points from this program. This program is all about shamatha practice. Shamatha is the practice of cultivating a calm, clear, focused mind. The first part, shama, means calm, and ta means to remain or abide, a mind that is abiding single-pointedly on an object. So shamatha practice is a concentration or samadhi practice. Why is this important, this practice? We saw there in terms of everyday life, this practice helps to improve attention skills. And through doing that, we'll become more effective in everything we do in our life. We'll have much better mental balance. We'll become the masters of our mind instead of being the slaves of our mind. And then often it also can translate into some physical health benefits such as a better quality of sleep. But here at the deeper level, we're engaging in this practice because it's an integral part of the pursuit of genuine happiness. That in all Buddhist traditions, there are three core practices to engage in to strive for that genuine happiness: ethics, concentration, wisdom, or in other words, ethics, shamatha, and vipassana. And here we saw that from the shamatha chart that the root of samsara, the root of all of our problems, is cut by a union of shamatha and vipassana, observing emptiness. So shamatha is really the basis of vipassana practice, and we need that calm, clear, focused mind to then later be able to penetrate the nature of reality through vipassana practice. And in the shamatha training, there are 2 points we'll be looking at in this session: the prerequisites, how to set up our life in such a way to support this practice, and then also how to integrate this practice into our daily life. But first, let's have a look at some of the other elements that we've covered in the shamatha training, such as preparation, the qualities to cultivate, object to focus on, tools we use, and the faults, and then the stages of progress in this practice. We saw there the importance of preparing body, speech, and mind well at the beginning of every meditation session, to really set up a good posture so we can set and forget the body so it doesn't create problems in meditation, to allow the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm, and then bringing the mind into the present moment in a very relaxed way, the mind clear. And this preparation of relaxed body and mind is going to give us a very good basis for engaging in the actual meditation practice. And here in shamatha practice, there are these 3 qualities that we are cultivating: relaxation, stability, and clarity. And we saw there really the importance of first establishing a basis in relaxation, using that tree analogy, that if we don't first sink deep roots of relaxation, then the tree, the trunk and branches of shamatha practice, the tree of shamatha practice will keep falling over. And so first sink deep roots of relaxation. That will be able to support a stronger trunk of stability. And then that will be able to in turn support the leaves and branches, the leaves and foliage of clarity. In terms of objects, we saw from the quote from the great Indian master Sangha that if we have a lot of obsessive compulsive thinking, then the best object to use is the breath. And so this, I think, accounts for most of us in the modern world. We're really caught up in a lot of discursive thinking. And so the breath can help us to get out of that and get into the present moment. And hence we've been using mindfulness of breathing in this program as the object for shamatha practice. These 3 variations of full body, which is good for cultivating relaxation, the abdomen, very conducive for improving stability of attention, and then the nostrils, very good for improving clarity of attention. But we mentioned a couple of other objects that can be very useful, such as observing the mind. Through that, observing our thoughts, we can really become the masters of our mind. The resting in awareness practice is very much a bridge into the vipassana practice. And then even using a mental image of a Buddha can be very helpful as a preparation for tantra level of practice. So the general recommendation is use the object that works best for you. for many of us, at least initially, I think the breath, one of the variations of the breath practice, will probably be the best object to use. And we saw here in this practice that we have two main tools, this rope of mindfulness, this to tie our mind to the object, means mindfulness simply to be able to hold the object, to not forget it, to not become distracted. But then we need that second tool of introspection, the hook of introspection, for quality control, to monitor the mindfulness. Are we still on the object, or are we starting to become dull or distracted? And if we are, reapply mindfulness to the object. So through these two main tools, then we can progress in the shamatha practice. And we can overcome those 5 faults using those eight antidotes. And we saw there that the first fault was the one of laziness when it comes to doing this practice. And here we have this quote from Tsongkhapa, the great Indian Tibetan master, the founder of the Gelug school of Tibetan Buddhism. And he says, if you cannot stop the laziness of being disinclined to cultivate concentration and of enjoying things that are not conducive to it, from the outset, you will not gain entry into concentration. Meaning that if we are still caught up in chasing after all these sensory pleasures, if we really see that the source of our happiness is still out there, then yes, we're going to be very lazy when it comes to meditating, because we'll be too busy trying to get all of those things that seem to make us happy. So we really need to shift our worldview to really understand that the source of happiness is coming from within, and that shamatha is the gateway, the door that opens the gate to that genuine happiness. And then we won't be lazy when it comes to doing this practice. And then we're using mindfulness to overcome forgetfulness, to forgetting the object. We're using introspection to monitor, are we getting caught up in dullness or distraction or laxity and excitation? And then if we're not applying any antidotes, then to apply antidotes when we become dull or distracted. But also not to apply any antidotes, not to keep adjusting our mind if the mind is focusing well. So this is equanimity. So if we apply those 8 antidotes, those 5 faults, we can move slowly along those 9 stages to shamatha that we looked at in this program. But before we go look at those again, just a little bit more on these 2 main imbalances of laxity and excitation, or dullness and distraction. And so here we saw that laxity is when we're not focusing on the object clearly, that our mind is sinking. And how to overcome, what are the strategies for remedying that laxity or sinking of the mind? And so the first line approach is, again here quoting from Tsongkhapa, he says, tighten up your apprehension of the object and continue meditating. So if we notice where mind is sinking into dullness or laxity, just sharpen our focus, particularly on the in-breath, and keep doing that. If you find that that's not really working and we have very strong sinking, then we really need to shift from the object and inspire ourselves by cultivating delight, particularly delight in having this wonderful opportunity to make our life meaningful and to see the benefits of this practice, and then uplift the mind. Because the most common reason we fall into sinking or dullness is we've simply lost interest in the practice. So we do that. If that doesn't really work, if we are trying to uplift the mind and that really doesn't work, then if it's very strong sinking, then we need to stop the meditation, because otherwise we're just increasing dullness and laxity, the very fault we're trying to overcome. So as a last ditch method, a last backup method, is we need to then eventually, if we can't overcome it, stop the meditation, clear away that laxity or dullness, and then go back and resume the meditation. And so we saw a Sangha recommending things like going for a walk, throwing some cold water on your face and so forth to really overcome that laxity or dullness. And then in terms of distraction here, we saw that the most common reason is excitation, that we're pulled away by the so-called sense pleasures, something exciting there. And so what do we do? How do we overcome that? Is, again, the first line strategy is simply, when we get distracted, draw in that scattered attention and fix your attention back on the object. So we saw there, relax, release the distraction, and return to the object. Just keep doing that. Keep coming back again and again and again. If you find that your mind is very much agitated and it's just all the time is getting pulled away, then we need to shift the mind from the object and then reflect on impermanence, to really reflect on the fact that everything that we're sort of pulling our attention away is transient, and to see the transient nature of all of those things that we're getting distracted by, and thereby be able to let go of that craving and attachment for them and bring the mind down, because the mind is really agitated. So we do that and then go back to the object. If we find that that's not even working, then as a last backup method, like laxity, then we need to stop the meditation, because if we just continue meditating and we're completely caught up in daydreaming and distraction, then we're just increasing the very faults we're trying to decrease. So again, as the last backup strategy, stop the meditation. And then here, Tsongkhapa says, cultivate a sense of disenchantment, meaning reflect on the futility of chasing after all those things out there that seem to be the source of our happiness. The futility of seeing that the source of my happiness and suffering is out there somewhere in the world. And so that can really bring down the mind, and we can really then go back into the meditation. So this is how some strategies for overcoming excitation, distraction. And then we can move along those 9 stages to shamatha. And we saw there the 9 stages, from directed attention up to attentional balance. And we move through these 9 stages through these 6 powers. That first we hear about the practice, understand what the practice is, then we can get to the first stage by applying those instructions. And then by reflecting on and thinking about the practice, getting more enthusiastic about the practice as well, we can move on to that second stage. And then by improving our mindfulness more and more and more, then we can move to those 3rd and 4th stages where we're really being able to hold the object quite well. And then through improving our quality control, our introspection, picking up more and more subtle levels of laxity and excitation, we can go deeper, we can go further onto these stages 5 and 6. And then through the power of enthusiasm, we can go much even further into stages 7 and 8, now where we can really just focus on the object for long periods of time, and any very little hint of subtle laxity or excitation easily dispelled. And then through complete familiarity in this practice, we move to stage 9. Now it becomes spontaneous, it's effortless. We can move in and out of meditation effortlessly. But we saw there that to move from stage 9 to shamatha, then there's that transition where we achieve the physical or mental pliancy, the serviceability of body and mind. And so then on that basis of achieving shamatha, we saw in this diagram, the next diagram, top right-hand corner, the meditator riding the elephant of the mind with a sword of wisdom in their right hand. So on the basis of shamatha, we can really effectively engage in the vipassana practice. So this is how we move through these 9 stages in shamatha training, very briefly. So what I'd like to do now is look at the prerequisites. And these prerequisites are how to set up our life in such a way to support this practice. And here there are listed 6 prerequisites. And to introduce this topic, I'd like to read from the recommended reading, Attention Revolution, from Alan Wallace. And he has a very good presentation here of the 6 prerequisites. So let's have a look at his introduction to this topic in his Attention Revolution. It's on page 50. And he says the following: when I lead shamatha seminars, I like to think of them as expeditions rather than retreats. The word retreat has a connotation not only of withdrawal, but also of defeat. And that certainly isn't the spirit of such practice. The word expedition, on the other hand, suggests adventure, conquest, and exploration. The Latin roots of the word have to do with extricating yourself, literally stepping out of some situation in which you've gotten stuck. In the practice of shamatha, we discover how deeply our minds are trapped in the twin ruts of excitation and laxity. or dullness and distraction, in other words. In the Buddhist tradition, a mind trapped in these ruts is said to be dysfunctional. And in order to make it serviceable, it is helpful to step out of our normal activities, seek out a spacious sense of solitude, and explore the frontiers of the mind. This expedition doesn't require blind faith or allegiance to any religious creed or metaphysical belief system. Over the past 3 millennia, contemplatives from various Asian cultures with diverse belief systems have followed the path of Shamatha to its culmination, and they have reported their findings. We don't need to accept their claims simply on their own authority, but if we are inspired by the earlier accounts of the benefits of this practice, we may venture forth on this path to see for ourselves whether we can achieve the results of the contemplative explorers who have preceded us. There are great adventures ahead, but also perils and dead ends. Sometimes the path is clear, but now and then it may seem to disappear altogether. The purpose of relying on those who know this path from their own experience is to save time. 6 prerequisites for sustained rigorous training are set forth in many Indian and Tibetan Buddhist meditation manuals. These are some of the essential causes and conditions that will produce the fruit of shamatha. So let's have a look at these 6 prerequisites now. The first is what's called the outer conditions, and then the other 5 are inner conditions. And the first one is supportive environment. And these 6 prerequisites were put together or described in the meditation text as 6 prerequisites for someone who really wants to go off and do a longer-term shamatha retreat. But I think you'll find that these also apply to us if we're not in an everyday life, even if we're not going off on some longer retreat. That if we can set up these prerequisites in a normal life, that would be a very good basis for engaging in a meaningful life, in a meaningful life. And so supportive environment here, 5 points often mentioned: easy access, meaning easily can get food and water and so forth, again, from the retreat setting. And a safe place, not something that's full of dangers or wild animals or so forth. Healthy place, a place that's not full of disease and so forth. And here is something that's very much relevant to us in the modern world: good friends. To have some like-minded people around us supporting us in our practice. And so this brings up the idea in Buddhism of sangha, of spiritual community. And I can't overemphasize this point enough, that if we really want to be able to begin to implement some of these ideas, to enable us to move in a better direction in our life, then we need help. We need this like-minded friends, good friends. If we have this idea, I can do all of this by myself, then based on my own experience and talking to many people, I think you're going to find it extremely difficult, if not impossible, because now we have very strong habits and we're easily influenced by others. And so what will happen is that we'll probably get swept up in our old habits very easily. Very hard to move against that. It's a little bit like trying to swim upwards and against the current in a stream. So we need help. And then also supportive environment, a quiet place, particularly here for shamatha practice. If where we meditate is noisy, that's one of the biggest causes of distraction as a beginner. Quiet place, very helpful. So these are some of the things to look for to have a supportive outer environment. Then the other 5 are to do with inner conditions. The next 2 sort of go together, and that is to have few desires and being content. And few desires is with respect to what we don't have. And this is to do with wealth, material possessions, and so forth. And being content is with respect to the things that we do have. So if we really want to have few desires and being content, I think it's going to be very helpful to shift our worldview. Because again, as long as our worldview is the source of my happiness is out there somewhere, I think it's going to be very difficult to have few desires meaningful material wealth and possessions, and to be content, because we'll think that we need more of that stuff to be more happy. Whereas if we understand that the real source of happiness lies within, then I think it's going to be easier to implement these ideas, to not have a lot of desires for accumulating more wealth and possessions, and really being content with what we do have. Because if we don't have these two things, we're not going to have time to meditate. We'll be spending all of our time chasing after all this stuff. And similarly, the fourth point, very similar, is to have few activities, is to simplify our life. Often I hear people say, oh, I'd really like to meditate, but I don't have time to meditate. Well, I think that's never a valid excuse. Of course, it is true that many of us, or most of us in the modern world, have very busy lives, a day's full of stuff. We never have enough time for everything. And some of the things we do every day is essential. Most of us have to work at some level to have enough money, to have a roof over our head and so forth. Some of us may have some family responsibilities, and some of us may have some other essential responsibilities. But above and beyond those essential activities we engage in on a daily basis, we tend to fill up our day with lots of stuff. And we tend to do that for one of two reasons. One is that in our modern society, if you're not, it's often said that we need to be very productive. And so if we're not doing something, we're not being productive. So just do something. And another reason is that if we're not doing anything, we're sitting quietly, that really forces us to look at the state of our mind, which tends to be a mess. So we often just tend to busy ourselves, to distract ourselves, to avoid to have a look at our state of our own mind. Now, to have a more simple life, what we could try to do is forcibly cut things out of our life. And I think that will be very much a big struggle. Rather, I think to help simplify our life, the preliminary practices, such as reflecting on precious human life and death, is going to be very helpful. Because if we really reflect on this precious human life that we've got lots of opportunities to make our life meaningful, and to reflect on death, to understand this opportunity is not going to last forever, then if we really internalize these two reflections, what I think you'll find is that you're going to lose interest in all of these activities in our life that don't bring us anything. We're not going to want to waste our life in those activities. And then suddenly we'll have time and space to engage in more meaningful things like meditation and so forth in our life. And on that point, I'd like to read a short quote, 2 paragraphs from Steve Jobs. It's part of a talk he gave many years ago to students at Stanford University. And I think you all know who Steve Jobs was. And he says, when I was 17, I read a quote that went something like, if you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right. It made an impression on me. And since then, for the past 33 years, I have looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations or pride or fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you're going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart. So I think this is a very good advice there from Steve Jobs. So if we really, really reflect on those two, precious human life and death, I think you'll find that all of these extra things that we fill up our day with that don't really bring us anything, we're just going to lose interest in them. Then we'll have time to meditate and more meaningful activities in our life. The fifth one is ethical discipline. So I think the basis of any sort of meaningful lifestyle is ethics. And here in the Attention Revolution, Alan Wallace not only talks about social ethics in terms of avoiding harming others, he talks about environmental ethics, avoiding harming the planet, and even psychophysical ethics in terms of looking after our body and mind. And then the last one is letting go of compulsive thinking, obsessive compulsive thinking. And I think we all have some obsessive compulsive thinking about certain things. And again, one way to really help that is to shift our worldview. Again, I think a lot of our obsessive compulsive thinking is about things out there, how to get those things out there that really are going to make me happy. How can I really avoid those things out there that seem to be causing me a lot of suffering? And so if we can shift that worldview, I think a lot of our obsessive compulsive thinking will drop away. And here Tsongkhapa says in his Lam Rim text on these 6 prerequisites, he says the most important ones are good ethical discipline, so ethics as a basis, seeing desires as disadvantageous, meaning to not go chasing after all those sensory pleasures out there because that's not going to bring us anything, just a lot of suffering. And then dwelling in appropriate area, meaning have a supportive environment, particularly like-minded friends. So these are, he's saying, the 3 most important of these 6. And just to summarize these 6, again, I'd like to read briefly from Attention Revolution on page 54. And Alan Wallace says the following. In our material society, even for people who are drawn to non-materialistic values, there is a strong tendency to take our current way of life as the norm and then to add meditation to fix it, like a band-aid applied to a festering wound. My first experience with meditation in the late 1960s is a good example. I went to a teacher who gave me a mantra and told me how to meditate on it. But in these instructions, there was no reference to the way I should lead the rest of my life. Even now, decades later, meditation is often taught with little or no reference to any of the above prerequisites. It has been reduced to a kind of first aid to alleviate the symptoms of a dysfunctional life, with all its anxieties, depression, frustration, and emotional vacillations. For a mind that has been assaulted with a myriad of mental afflictions, such as craving, hostility, and delusion, we need more than a medic. We need long-term intensive care. That's what this training is all about. And we see this a little bit in some of the modern day mindfulness traditions, is exactly what Alan Wallace is saying, is what often they have done is they've looked at this mindfulness, which they often get from Buddhism, and say, wow, this mindfulness thing, this looks really good. And they pull it out of the whole big framework and then simply offer it as even like a magic pill. Here, take this magic pill of mindfulness and all your problems will go away. In fact, they won't go away. In fact, you may even have more problems. Because, for example, if we have a dysfunctional lifestyle in terms of cheating and deceiving people to make money, if we apply mindfulness to that, then we'll maybe become even better at cheating and deceiving people. And then we're going to have even more problems as a result of that. And so we need a framework. And that's what these prerequisites help us to do. Have an effective framework so that this shamatha practice where we're cultivating mindfulness can be part of a bigger picture that can really help us to shift our life, to help us to move in a more meaningful way in our life towards genuine happiness and away from suffering. And together with that, then what we've seen is that the preliminary practices are very important, the foundation practices. And in particular, what is our supporting worldview? If our worldview is that the source of happiness and suffering is out there somewhere, i.e. it's what happens to us, then we're going to see pleasure as happiness, pain as suffering. And then it's all about what we can get from the world. And the world's not going to appear very user-friendly because there's a lot of unpleasant things that are coming our way from the world. And then as we saw, we're going to be very lazy. We won't have time to meditate because I need to be getting more of those pleasant things. I need to be putting more effort in avoiding those unpleasant things in my life. And then as we just seen, then our shamatha practice will become mindfulness. Someone coined this term mindfulness, like McDonald's, fast food mindfulness, meaning it's not going to be very effective. It'll be like Alan Wallace said, like a Band-Aid applied to a festering wound. If we simply add a little bit of mindfulness to our dysfunctional lifestyle. So therefore, if we can shift that worldview and really understand that the source of happiness and suffering is coming from within our own mind, then it's not so much about what happens to us, but how we respond to what happens to us. And then we'll understand that pleasure is not happiness, and that unpleasant, painful experiences is not suffering. And it's all about more about what we can bring to the world then. And then the world appears very user-friendly, because even with unpleasant experiences, then we can bring a lot to the world. And then we'll have a lot of enthusiasm to meditate, because we'll understand this shamatha practice is a gateway to genuine happiness. And so therefore, if we can really shift that worldview, then that's going to be a very good basis for these prerequisites in shamatha practice, and also vipassana and compassion practices. How do we cultivate the view of genuine happiness? First point, reflect on precious human life and death, to really have that aspiration to make our life meaningful. And then on that basis, to reflect on the causality of our actions, understanding that harmful actions bring suffering, beneficial actions bring happiness, and thereby adopt an ethical lifestyle. And then on that basis, to reflect on suffering and its causes, happiness and its causes, to really understand that the source of happiness and suffering is coming from within our own mind. And so we hear what we find in some Tibetan Buddhist traditions, these preliminary practices are packaged very nicely into what are called the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. The first one is to reflect on precious human life. The second one is to reflect on death and impermanence. The third one is to reflect on the causality of our actions. And the fourth one is, again, reflecting on suffering and its causes, happiness and its causes. And if we can really shift that worldview through these these preliminary practices, then it'll be much more easy to set up the framework to implement these inner prerequisites, because then you'll find you'll have not so much material desires, you'll be much more content, you'll be able to simplify your life, you'll be able to adopt an ethical lifestyle much more easy, and you'll be able to let go of a lot of obsessive compulsive thinking. And then you're going to have a lot more enthusiasm to meditate. You won't be lazy when it comes to doing this practice, because you'll understand that, again, shamatha is the key that opens the gate to genuine happiness. And also, through shifting worldview, that will enable our career to become more rewarding. Because as long as our career is all about what we can get from the world, we're never going to get enough. We'll never really be fully rewarded in our career, no matter what our career is. Rather, if we can shift the worldview, then our career is all about what we can bring to the world. And then even if we have a very simple job, that can be very meaningful. We can bring a lot to the world, and then we can be much more rewarding regardless of what our career is. And also with this shift in view, then we'll be able to more easily see difficult situations as opportunities. Now we tend to see difficult situations as problems or obstacles. We have a lot of aversion. We have thereby magnifying suffering. But if we can see difficult situations as opportunities, that will help us to grow as a person. We'll work through those difficulties. So here we see the importance of preliminary practices, particularly establishing this view of genuine happiness. Now, just a little bit of general advice before we go to the meditation. When to meditate? Best to do the daily meditation early in the morning. It's when we're rested, it's most quiet, and it's a good way to start the day. Also very helpful to meditate at the same time each day, because one of the most difficult things as a beginner is simply developing the habit to meditate on a daily basis. And if we keep changing the time when we meditate, we're not developing a habit. So pick a time that works for you and stick to it. And to help develop a habit, set yourself a challenge. Initially say, okay, for the next 7 days, I'm going to meditate at this time every day. Once you've managed that a few times, set a 30-day challenge. For the next 30 days, I'm going to meditate at that time every day. Modern studies show if we do something for 25 or 30 days in a row, we really start to develop a habit. Once we develop a habit, much easier to sustain that daily meditation practice. Where to meditate? quiet location. We saw that in the prerequisites. If you don't have a quiet place to meditate, I highly recommend using noise cancelling headphones. They're very helpful to cut down noise. And then if it's possible, have a separate room to meditate at home. If that's not possible, at least set aside a corner of a room to meditate and make it inviting and comfortable. And so you can associate that place with meditation. Very helpful. How long to meditate? Always emphasize quality over quantity. If we try and meditate too long as a beginner, then for the latter part of the meditation, we're just going to get caught up in a lot of dullness and distraction. And then we're just going to increase the faults we're trying to actually decrease. So use a timer. And if we use a timer, big advantage. If we don't set a timer, then on days where things are not going so well, maybe we're very agitated, negative state of mind, we sit down, we try and meditate 5-10 minutes, not really working, and we stop, we give up. Not a good habit to get into. If in our life, if we give up whenever things get difficult, we'll never progress and develop as a person. If we set a timer, things are difficult, we'll persevere till the timer. So that'll help us to develop perseverance. On other days though, if we don't set a timer, maybe things are going very well. And so we go, oh, this is good, I'll keep meditating. And we keep meditating until when? Until it's not going so well, and then we stop. And the thing we remember most about meditating is how it ended. And if it always ends on a bad note, we're going to start to associate meditation with not such good experiences. We're not going to be enthusiastic to meditate again. If we set a timer, it's going well, we stop, we remember that, then we'll be enthusiastic to meditate again the following day. We always start as a beginner with short sessions. But if we really want to move along these 9 stages, then as we go a bit further in the practice, we will need to increase the duration we meditate. But when we increase, don't like double it from 15 to 30 or 20 to 40, 3 to 5 minute increments. How to know when to increase the time we meditate? One measure is if our normal experience is at the end of the meditation, our normal experience is, oh, I would have liked to have done a little bit more, then that's a sign to maybe start to increase duration. Then some more general advice, and then we'll go to the meditation. Making effort. Training the mind requires effort. But here, effort is not about gritting our teeth and forcing ourselves to do the practice. In fact, effort is defined as a mind that delights in virtue, a mind that's happy to do good things. If we're happy to do good things, it becomes effortless. So if we see practice as some sort of hardship, we've completely missed the point. Therefore, understand the benefits of the practice, always have a joyful mind when we do the practice. Key to progress, continuity. Continuity means to train the mind on a daily basis, meaning daily meditation practice, and then integrating that into daily life. But also helpful at least on an annual basis to do a meditation retreat. And as a beginner, good to do as a group, a week or 10-day group retreat. It's a little bit easier. That will give us a lot of inspiration and boost to our practice, so very helpful. Also to avoid unrealistic expectations. Certainly to avoid the unrealistic expectation that simply by accumulating some intellectual understanding about these Buddhist practices, that will somehow automatically change our life. It won't. We need to implement these ideas. And then when we implement the ideas into practice, not to have the expectation that, well, actually, my practice should get better every day, every week. I don't know anyone whose practice sort of goes like this. Over the short term, there'll be a lot of ups and downs. So not to have this expectation. No expectation, no possibility of being frustrated. And when we're facing difficult situations in our practice and in daily life, not to see them as some sort of problems, but as opportunities. And we know that generally the times where we most developed as a person in our life is not when things were going well. Generally, when things go well in our life, we tend to float along and not really develop as a person. We tend to only develop as a person when we're challenged, when we're faced with some sort of difficulties. And so actually in practice in daily life, that's actually an opportunity to really deepen our practice to develop as a person. And again, I can't overemphasize the point of the importance of like-minded friends, of spiritual sangha. We need help as a beginner to get support. We need to support others. So really find those people, connect with them, and get supported if we really want to progress in practice. And so that brings us to meditation. And what I'd like to do now is a meditation that can help us to begin to shift our worldview, to begin to help us to build a little bit of a more encompassing vision of our life, how to make our life meaningful, to really help us to start to have a framework, an effective framework for shamatha and other meditative practices. Let's do that meditation now. Find a nice, comfortable posture. Let's begin. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. And relaxing more deeply with each out-breath. And with each out-breath, letting go of any thoughts that may have arisen, happily releasing them. And simply allowing the mind to come to rest, in the stillness of the present moment. Allowing the mind to remain relaxed, still, and clear. Now, no matter how much mental afflictions are in our mind, that is, no matter how much craving and attachment, anger and jealousy, fear and anxiety, and so forth are in our mind, these mental afflictions are not part of the nature of our mind. They're merely like dirt covering the surface of our mind. And beneath these mental afflictions is the natural purity of our mind. So imagine this inner purity of your mind in the form of a small, white, radiant sphere of light at the center of your chest, at the level of your heart. And then we can begin to build a vision for this life by reflecting on 4 points. And the first point is, what are your deepest aspirations in this life? What is your heart's desire? What would you really like to achieve in this life? and try to picture your deepest aspirations very clearly. And then arouse the thought, may I realize my deepest aspirations. And then with each out-breath, imagine rays of light radiating out from the sphere of light at your heart and filling your entire body and mind. And imagining that your deepest aspirations are being actualized right here and now. Now, in order to help you fulfill your deepest aspirations, what kinds of material assistance would you like to receive from the world around you? And what kinds of friendship and guidance would you like to receive from the people around you? And then arouse the thought, may I receive everything that I need to help me realize my deepest aspirations. And then with each in-breath, imagine reality rising up in the form of white light, streaming in from all directions and providing you with everything you need. Now, the help that we receive from the world around us is not enough for us to realize the genuine happiness that we seek. For this, inner transformation is essential. So the third point to reflect on is, how would you like to transform and evolve as a person? What faults would you like to be free of? And what qualities would you like to possess? And then arouse the aspiration, may I cultivate the true causes of my own fulfillment. And then with each out-breath, imagine the white light of loving kindness radiating out from your heart, filling your body and mind. And imagining that you're actually becoming that person with those qualities, free of those faults, right here and now. And then finally, for the sake of your own fulfillment and to make your own life as meaningful as possible, what would you truly like to offer to the world using your own unique talents? And then with each out-breath, imagine the white light of loving kindness radiating out in all directions from your heart as you actualize this offering to the entire world right here and now. And then release all appearances and allow the mind to come to rest. To come to rest in that inner purity of the mind. Which is in the nature of loving kindness. And we can bring the meditation to a close. Now, how to set up our daily life in such a way to integrate this practice and other practices into our daily life before we go to question and answer. Always helpful to start the day with a good motivation. And here I like one from His Holiness Dalai Lama, where he says, every day, think as you wake up, I'm going to benefit others as much as I can. I think this is always an excellent way to start the day. And then in the morning to do the daily meditation practice, particularly as a beginner, emphasizing shamatha practice. And here we've looked at the 3 variations of the breath practice to really just calm and focus the mind, to develop mindfulness, to develop our attention skills. But also to have not just shamatha practice, but we saw just now, to have an integrated approach to practice. That the other areas of practice that we need to really pay attention to, preliminary practices that we've briefly touched on, They provide the foundation for not only shamatha, but for all other practices. And then the two main wings of practice of wisdom and compassion, or vipassana and compassion. So these four core areas, I think we need to touch on if we want an integrated, effective approach to practice. Meaning that if we are engaging in 2 meditation sessions in the morning, perhaps we're meditating for 30 minutes and we're having 2 15-minute sessions with a little break in the middle, then what I would recommend is doing the shamatha in the first session and then doing a more analytical style of meditation, which the preliminaries, compassion and vipassana all come in this basket, to follow the shamatha with one of those practices. If we're only doing one session in the morning, what I would recommend is some mornings just do shamatha. Other mornings, bring in a little bit of analytical. So maybe you can start with 5 or 10 minutes of shamatha, and the rest of the session you can do one of the preliminary practices or a compassion practice or a vipassana practice. And then what to meditate on in terms of these other practices, the preliminaries, compassion, vipassana, because there's a whole range of practices there. Here, I think we can be flexible and use what is appropriate and helpful for what's going on in our life at the moment. If you're finding yourself caught up, if you find yourself very lazy, or you're caught up in a lot of craving for sensory pleasures, then the preliminary practice is very helpful. Precious human life, death and impermanence, and so forth, to really be able to let go of that. If you find yourself being very apathetic and indifferent to others, very much recommended loving kindness, compassion practice. If you find yourself getting caught up in a lot of jealousy or despair, empathetic joy, focusing on the positive aspects of ourselves and others. If there's a lot of grasping and attachment and so forth, vipassana practice of either impermanence or emptiness to help release that grasping or attachment. So again, we can be flexible on those practices depending on what's happening in our life at the moment. And then during the day, we need to continue to implement what we've meditated on. And here, I like as a quote that I very much like from Viktor Frankl. And he says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Now we tend to be stimulus reaction machines. Some stimulus comes, we react out of habit, and often our reactions are not very good. But there is this little gap between stimulus and when we react. That's that space. And if we have developed some mindfulness in shamatha practice, we can gain access to that space and then to respond in a better way than react in a negative way. And that's where, in that gap, lies our growth and our freedom. Therefore, to continue to cultivate mindfulness through the day, seed the day with mindfulness, using triggers such as whenever we have any tension, any particular physical activities, if we have a break, or there are certain apps like mindfulness apps that program to give us a little signal, maybe once an hour. And then stop whatever we're doing and do a little short mindfulness exercise. Keep it very short, maybe just focus on the breath for 3 breaths. So if we seed intermittently the day with mindfulness, we're going to start to become more and more mindful. Letting go of that compulsive thinking. If we're caught up in a lot of obsessive compulsive thinking, one thing helpful to do is to go back into the body, anchor ourselves in the breath. And then have this witnessing mode, as Viktor Frankl was saying, is to simply notice whatever is there. And that's called open awareness. We have that window of opportunity to notice certain stimulus, and then rather than react, respond with loving kindness and compassion, rather than react simply with attachment to pleasure, aversion to unpleasant things. So this is a little bit what we can do during the day. And at the end of the day, if you have time to do a second meditation, very good. And if you are doing 2 meditations a day, one in the morning, one in the evening, I would recommend shamatha in the morning and one of these analytical style meditations, preliminaries, compassion or vipassana practice in the evening, when maybe the mind is a little bit more dull. So we need something a bit more active to uplift the mind in the evening. And then when we go to bed, what I really recommend, as we looked earlier in this program, use the Shavasana posture. Go into Shavasana posture, review the day. How did it go? Pick one negative thing, not so good thing we did during the day, purify the mind of that through these 4 opponent powers. First, having some sincere regret for that, having done that negative behavior. Reliance means to reaffirm positive direction in our life. Remedy means think of some sort of practical remedy for that negative behavior. And then resolve, make a strong determination not to do that negative behavior again the following day. So if we go through those 4 points with 1 negative behavior, that's going to weaken that habit, that negative imprint. Equally important, maybe even more important, pick 1 good thing we did during the day, rejoice in that behavior, be happy about that, resolve, make a strong determination to continue that good behavior the next day. So that's going to increase positive behaviors. And then pick 1 thing we received during the day and have a deep sense of gratitude. We tend to not be grateful for the things we receive. We tend to not notice the things we receive. So really practice that gratitude. We take things for granted normally. If we practice that gratitude and that rejoicing in the positive things, that can really shift our perspective of our life. And then when we go to bed, as a transition for sleep, as we saw in the earlier module on Shavasana, simply releasing any tension in the body, releasing any thoughts in the mind, keep releasing that. When you get drowsy, you mentally know your meditation's finished, physically move out of that posture into whatever posture you use for sleep. So this is a good way to transition into sleep at the end of every day, because often at the end of the day, maybe a lot of things going on in the mind, still a lot of tension in the body. So this can help release all of that and move into sleep. So this is a little bit how to set up the day. So now we have some time for question answer. So if you have any questions, again, put it in the chat and Sunny can read out the questions.
Yes, everybody, I have I'll read it. Let me see. I have a question here, but and then at the end of the Q&A, I have a couple of announcements. So the question is, what do you think of traditions that emphasize ignoring pain in the body, even if you feel great pain, and that if you do feel great pain, it's a good thing because that strengthens the mind?
Ignoring pain. Well, probably not a good idea if our body's telling us that there's a problem we need to fix. It's not a good idea to ignore some physical illnesses, because they could get worse. So I think in terms of ignoring pain, better advice is to not get caught up in the pain with aversion. So rather than ignoring pain, we practice what's called acceptance, simply acknowledging the pain. Because soon as we see pain in the body, what we tend to do is we go, oh, I know what that is. That's pain. I don't like that. I want that to go away. And we have aversion. And all that does is magnifies the amount of suffering we experience. And so rather, if there's pain in the body, to notice that. And again, we can understand, well, this is an opportunity to practice patience, not to have this aversion, and then to deal with that difficulty in the body, because we may often learn a lot of things from difficulties in the body and the mind. So rather than ignoring, because for us, ignoring means like sort of block it or push it away, that's not helpful, because we just have aversion, and then we maybe ignore things that we really need to respond to. So rather than ignoring, I think the advice there would be to observe it without getting caught up in it, without having this aversion to the pain and just turning it into suffering, and to learn from that pain. And if we can fix the problem, fix it. If we can't, it'll pass. That's great advice we often hear from Shantideva. So that, I think, is a better approach than just ignoring pain.
Thank you. From Catherine, can you give an example of how to do an analytical Vipassana meditation?
There are many. Often in Vipassana in Buddhism, the foundation practice is often in terms of impermanence. And so and we tend to start by investigating the body. So one very good, simple Vipassana practice we can do, and is very good for many reasons, is to do simply a body scan. And that can help us to get out of a lot of obsessive compulsive thinking. Go into the body and just scan the body, noticing sensations in the body. That's all. And just noticing that, and that can really help us to come to an insight into impermanence, that our body actually is just simply changing moment by moment. So that's a very good one to start with, because it doesn't involve a lot of analysis, just a simple scanning through the body, observing the reality of the body. So I recommend to start there.
Okay. You talked about the 3 realms of samsara. What are the 3 realms?
3 realms of samsara. Now we're getting very technical, but samsara is not really a place. Samsara is a state of mind. So if our mind is still got lots of mental afflictions, we're stuck in samsara. So we experience this world as samsara. And this world that we experience is called the desire realm, because our main driving motivation is this desire and attachment. But in Buddhist cosmology, we can talk about two higher planes or realms of existence, which is called the form realm and formless realm. We don't have direct access to those now, but through various meditations and so forth, you can gain access to those higher types of realms of existence. So that's what the 3 realms of samsara means. And for us, it really just means that our world of experience, you know.
Okay. So there's no more Q&A. At this point, Glenn, I just want to say thank you very much for the six weeks. It's really been wonderful teaching about meditation, and really opened up some windows. So thank you very much on behalf of Shantideva. I'm going to put some links in the chat, and one of those is for I'll put some links in the chat. I'll put in for Dana, and also I'll put in for some people wanted to know links to your slides so that they can access your slides on, and then also future Shantideva teachings. So I'm going to put that in.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. Then let's, before we run away though, let's dedicate all of our efforts, not only from this session, but from the entire program. And we can dedicate them on the basis again of the Shantideva dedication. So I'll read out the verses of this dedication prayer. And again, you might like to reflect on the words while I read out the dedication. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain a notion of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. And then lastly, I'd like to thank Shantideva for inviting me to run this program, and then all the people, including yourself, Sunny, who've helped to support this program. And lastly, all of you who've attended this program, and I really hope that you got something out of this program. And if you did, don't just leave it as some nice ideas, but as we saw in this session, use these ideas to develop yourself and integrate them into your daily life to have a more meaningful life and to really help those around you do likewise. So thank you very much, and hope to see you again all sometime soon, probably online again. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Please continue teaching.
Thank you, Glenn. It was wonderful.